It's a perfect segue, actually, to the things I want to talk about today, because she touched on the importance of onboarding in getting customers up to speed and making sure that they're off to a good start. Get you started here. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we did over the last year to really ramp up our onboarding program. I came into ProsperWorks about a year ago, and with a problem of really trying to scale an onboarding process for a small business clientele. So a little bit before that, a little introduction on myself. So my name is Justin Oberbauer. I'm the VP of Customer Success at ProsperWorks. ProsperWorks is the CRM for Google. So if anybody is familiar with it, we're directly tied into the Google Apps for Work ecosystem. The design, interaction is all integrated. And what we really focus on is making it possible for salespeople to really focus on what's important for them, which is really talking to their customers and making sure that they're able to deliver the information their customers need to make good decisions. What we don't want to have them be doing is focusing on entering data and tracking activities and syncing emails and all of that laborious administrative task that usually makes CRM fail. So we're really focused on making sure that it's possible for that experience to be the best. I've been in CS for about 15 years now, started off in graphic design, but I've always been in these customer-facing roles, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to really deliver these kind of scalable account management exercises into businesses. So first thing I wanted to, there we go. So when we came to ProsperWorks, when I first got there, we basically had a very reactive type of CS model. We had a few people in the business that were mostly focused on just dealing with the inbound questions. CRM as a reality is a very complex product to be able to onboard people onto. For the most part, it's a business tool that can affect a lot of different types of use cases, whether it's project management or contacts or sales process automation. And as much as possible as it is to make that process very seamless and easy for people to get onboarded with, it actually is very important that they get through that first 60-day period. And so whenever we would bring a customer into ProsperWorks, the first thing we would hear are questions like, well, why did I actually buy this? Those are kind of the things that are hard to answer through the self-service model. And I'm sure a lot of you that have similar processes kind of hear this as well. Where do we start? What do I do with all this data once I get it into it? And there's only so much you can do through an automated system to get them through that adoption process. And when we started to dig into it, about 47% in general of CRM implementations tend to fail, and it's primarily because you can't get them to that point of full adoption where they're actually incorporating the CRM into their business, not just into their process or their workflows where you're actually getting them to load the data, but really becoming a mission-critical application so that when the data is not there, the system is not there, it actually prevents them from being able to do their job. And so our goal was really to figure out how we could do this for as many customers as possible. And our customer base is relatively small. We average 3 seats and less than 3,000 ACV, so it's very expensive if we want to take them through a full-service onboarding situation. But we needed to figure out how to do it. So we asked ourselves this question: is it possible to actually do a full-service, enterprise-quality onboarding for a small business customer base, customers that have 5 seats, customers that only have 3,000 in ACV? That is a hands-on, very kind of comprehensive process. These contracts, these are not annual contracts, they're monthly contracts. There's no commitment from the customer. But in order for us to kind of hit those milestones, we really need to help guide them through that process. So we took on this challenge, and we decided that the first thing we were going to do is really take on a philosophy of the key 3 things. So I want to walk you through what those things are. So the first thing we decided is that, my philosophy has always been every day starts green. So every single day we have an opportunity to contact a customer, communicate with them, pick them up from sales from a sense of success. And the sense of success is kind of what kind of permutates this perpetual engine. There's a great slide that is one of my favorite slides I've ever seen, and you guys are probably very familiar with this one, but it's Guy Nerpaz's slide around how success kind of flows. I kind of appropriated this, so thanks very much to Guy for preparing this, but it really illustrates what I think are the key things that drive a successful onboarding approach. It's hitting transitions. First and foremost, the number one thing is you have to hand off, you have to transition the account responsibility as cleanly as possible with the appropriate amount of communication, the appropriate amount of expectation setting, and the appropriate amount of ownership all along the way. So in order to do that, you have to build in some processes that really emphasize that. And we've really focused on these. And if we're able to kind of accomplish these 3 things, we find that we're able to kind of keep the ball rolling, and we don't drop it along the way. So transitions. So everybody familiar with what I mean by transitions? So transitions happen when you move the account from sales into CS or onboarding, from onboarding into CS, from CS into support as it happens throughout the process. So transitions in our business are very important and the most important thing that we focus on. And we basically have put all of our emphasis in automation and making sure that communication transition happens very effectively. It's important that it gives the customer confidence that you are there to help them. You pick up the ball very quickly. You don't drop it. You keep the momentum going. And that momentum keeps confidence building. When customer knows that as soon as the sales deal has happened, their CSM has been introduced by the head of CS, they have a list of instructions that they're able to pick up with, and they know who to contact next. Those build a sense of confidence from the organization that we are actually caring about you after you've left the sales process. That golden moment of kind of signing the deal is a really exciting part for most customers, but oftentimes that's where it starts to fall apart. Because we overinvest in sales because it moves the needle on the top line, but we tend to underinvest on the support and CS side because it's expensive and it's typically considered a cost. So really emphasizing the transitions, do it quickly as possible, do it in an automated fashion if possible because you need to be able to scale, but also make sure that it's meaningful, that it's not just an automated trigger that anybody could be getting, but is actually delivering the information you want to get to them quickly. Ownership is kind of this mantra that I take on with my team, and that's the sense that as soon as a customer becomes part of the CS organization, so effectively wants to become a customer, it's owned by CS, and it tends to be owned by the person that gets it. And ownership means that there's one person in the business that's responsible for taking on that customer, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it stalls, whether they're super happy, but this person is going to make sure that they follow the path, they stay on track, they communicate back and forth, they get the proper expectations, but then ultimately the buck stops with them. So we aren't in a situation, and we often can be in situations where CS gets an account. It's a complicated account. There might have been some expectations that were met during the sales process that we weren't very clear. Those can tend to take things off track very quickly if you don't get ahead of that very quickly. And oftentimes we'll loop back into sales. Hey, ask sales for help. Hey, did you sell this deal? What expectations did you set? I need your help to kind of close this out. But they've moved on to the next thing. And oftentimes, if that ambiguity isn't kind of corrected, who knows what to do next? Maybe the onboarding project manager assumes the salesperson is going to handle it because he said he would follow up with it and reach out to them, make sure he gets that information, and then we kind of move on. Well, in our organization, it's still owned by CS. So no matter what happens, even if the AE is going to take over that conversation, it's up to the onboarding project manager to make sure that it cycles through. And we do metrics and tracking to make sure that those types of activities are covered so that we don't let things fall through the cracks. So we use a pipeline type of dashboard, such as this, to kind of track that information. So as customers come through our onboarding process, we have a set of SLAs that they have to get through certain parts of it in a certain period of time. And so customers that are on track would be considered green. Customers that are off track but aren't really at risk yet, but we know that they're off track from our SLA, they're going to be yellow. And if they're completely off track and not engaging, they're going to be red. And every single day, the progress of these customers through those onboarding stages are going to get tracked here, and it gives good visibility into understanding how many customers are on track, how many customers are off track, who we need to focus on. And this allows us to do this at scale without having to really focus on one customer at a time. We do about 75 onboardings a month across 3 people, so it's about 25, and each customer is invested probably 10 to 20 hours of that time across that company over the lifespan of that onboarding. And we're trying to make it more efficient, but it is a very expensive process to do it the right way. So doing as much as we can through a highly scalable model, be able to get the metrics and to see how things are flowing, allows us to focus on the issues as they arise. One of the most important aspects of this, I think, to emphasize is that notion of failure to launch. Because onboarding is really about making sure that customers are getting to that adoption phase or getting to that milestone that you've established. Now I know that they're kind of ready to be out on their own. We pay a lot of attention to try to prevent those failure to launch situations because the failure to launch situations are what are going to impact those customers that don't get through the process. And they can happen early in the stage, like when you find there's a problem with some expectation that they had, but they can also have it later on when you feel like everything is going well. They're not necessarily communicating things are bad, but they're not necessarily engaging as well, and they'll just kind of go dormant. So we use these kind of color codes to really define how our escalation process is established to see who gets involved with the conversation to bring them back on track. Typically, green and yellow is still the domain of the onboarding project manager and the customer success team. When it gets into yellow stage or red stage, that's when it starts to go through the escalation pass. And that's basically a trigger from the project manager that, hey, I need help. I've decided that I'm moving them into this category. These are customers that are at risk. These are customers that they haven't not necessarily indicated that there's a problem, but I'm feeling that there's a problem because it's not following the path that we have to get them to. So another important aspect of our process is about prescription, and we emphasize this for our customers. You guys may have similar processes as well, but it's really important that you define what you want the path of onboarding to be. And you stick to it as much as possible. Even if customers try to take you off track or want to take you through a process that's more specific to their scenario or their use case, we always start off with kind of a standard process, standard approach. And then we let the project manager kind of decide in the conversations when we can kind of divert from it. But for the most part, it's going to go through all of these stages. Meeting one for us is always about discovery. It's always about understanding the needs of the customer. It's revisiting what the salesperson might have understood from the process. It's making sure that those handoff notes are actually correct. There's actually consistency. But it also gives us an opportunity to show them that, hey, we're prepared. And we actually did do a handoff, and we are interested in understanding how we can kind of build off of what's important for you. But at the same time, everything that we go through may not necessarily be important to that customer when we do it. Same thing on customer effort in meeting 2. If a customer has a bunch of homework to do in between these 2 meetings, we're going to kind of define what that is specifically for them at that moment in time so that we can start to divert some of these things. And this process has allowed us to start to segment these for different types of customers in a more dynamic way so that we don't necessarily have to have all of that invested time. Over the past year, we've realized this process applies very well to the smallest customers, but it doesn't necessarily scale that well to larger customers or highly segmented ones. And so it's given us the insight to really understand where we can change it, where it works, where it doesn't work for different types of customers, and really start to optimize this as we kind of continue to scale upmarket. It's probably pretty obvious that automation is key in this kind of process. And so we decided early on that where we were going to focus our efforts in automation was really about hitting those principles, which is transition, ownership, expectation setting. So when a customer comes through ProsperWorks, starting from the deal sign, and honestly a little bit before that, we automate communication cycles and flows that go out to the customer. So from the sales process, when a customer converts an opportunity to one in ProsperWorks, it generates an onboarding opportunity in another pipeline within ProsperWorks that allows us to capture all the data that was in the notes and activities that was with that kind of previous opportunity. That will then trigger a message from me specifically to all of our customers whenever they come on board, basically welcoming them to ProsperWorks. It allows me to introduce the CSM or onboarding project manager that's going to be associated with them, give them some instructions and some homework. I'm going to be able to emphasize the importance of what our role is in this process, what we're expecting them to kind of play in this, and when we'll be able to get started. In that same email, we have a link to the calendar, allows them to schedule automatically, right into the calendar that's available so that we don't have to do this back and forth, trying to schedule meetings. They can schedule it on their own. But we're also kind of watching the clock. So if it takes them too long to be able to schedule that meeting, then this message is going to go out again to make sure that they didn't miss it and forget about it. At the same time, the CSM that was assigned is actually going to send a message too. And those can be triggered or those can be automated or manual depending on the customer. But that allows us to stay on top of these types of things as they're dealing with existing customers and new ones coming in. We leverage a lot of integrations and a lot of data in the process. Data is always sometimes hard to bring together, but we have integrated with Gmail and with Zapier, using Zapier and Totango and ProsperWorks and all these different places that allow us to get that information into the right spot. Along the process of onboarding, most of it kind of follows that cadence. The project manager kind of works in a traditional project manager process where they have meetings and they have a set schedule. But it's in between those phases that we'll start to leverage Totango to really give us insight into what's going on in the background as they're progressing through that process. So the process of onboarding isn't necessarily defined by time. It's kind of organized by time, and really look at making sure that we get through it in a specific time period, but we're really defining success of the onboarding process by the adoption rate and whether or not they're actually using the tool, and is that tool feeding into what we think is going to be a highly successful customer. So all through the process, we're using these points to really drive home. I think what we learned later on in the process was, instead of really focusing on the time, was really to leverage the data to drive the process. That dashboard was originally oriented around a kind of velocity and time, but as we kind of soon discovered, some customers will adapt really quickly, others need more help, and if we just held them to a specific kind of a schedule or set of meetings, we were going to miss out on some customers. They were going to go out too early, they were going to get handed off. They were going to introduce to their CSM in a less than desirable state. So we have a process where the onboarding project manager hands off to a customer success manager after onboarding completes to kind of take over the account. And if they're pushed in too early and they're not truly adopting, then it's going to be a bad situation for the CSM. So our process now has a very kind of defined transition requirement that in order for a customer to move out of onboarding, it has to meet criteria, including adoption, including kind of assessment by the CSM that there aren't any outlying issues, and the CSM themselves have to actually accept that they're ready to accept that process, because they will end up in their portfolio over time. So these are examples of the dashboards that we use in that process as well. Really important, in my opinion, is to really look at the effectiveness of your adoption and onboarding program 2 months after it completes. So if you're really looking to kind of drive performance in your team and you want to measure how well they're doing, we should be looking at the accounts that they brought on board, not the day that they were onboarded, but actually 2 months later when it's not even in their portfolio anymore. It's really important for driving that kind of trust with the CSM, for making sure that they're thinking about what's best for the customer long term and not necessarily best for the customer like today to get them through their process. And so we've changed our compensation model to actually incentivize the onboarding project manager to think about what the customer's likelihood of adoption is going to be at that moment in time, 60 days out, since that's what we know is going to be the kind of criteria for being successful, and that's what their variable will be based on. So we'll look at a portfolio of customers that are 2 months out. We'll evaluate their health score, look at adoption criteria, and if they hit a certain threshold, then they're going to get comped on those kinds of situations. The biggest impact this has had is on both the quality of the adoption, but also the quality of the onboarding to the CSM, because now they know that the CSM has backup in that first period of time. If the onboarding project manager is actually looking at an account that's entering this period, even though they haven't thought about them for a month and a half, they're going to start getting involved in making sure that follow-up is happening, making sure that outreach is appropriate, do they need any extra training, and start to assist the CSM in the process because they know that they actually have accountability for it. So, and it's worked out really well. So as far as takeaways and lessons learned, with any process like this, we started a little bit too aggressively on the automation side. In hindsight, it was probably better to start thinking about things in a manual way to really tune up our messaging, tune up our flows. So I'd recommend, as you start to roll kind of scaled onboarding programs like this out, start to think about the handoffs and transitions in an automated way and kind of do things without trying to invest a lot of time in programming, just to make sure you get the cadence right and make sure that you can segment it properly if you need to. Definitely emphasize goals on that future adoption, making sure that you're incentivized for what you want the outcome to be at a later point in time, as opposed to just necessarily, creating, the throughput. Limiting we invented a forum that allows us to communicate with sales on what the key value drivers are for customers, and we made the mistake of allowing the salespeople to tell us in long form what they felt the key value drivers were, and it was all over the map. So what we ended up doing was deciding on a list of what we felt that the people were buying ProsperWorks for and what challenges they were really solving for, and we let them select from that so that we're always focused on something that we know we have kind of a message around, and avoid things like, it's really important that they get it live by Friday, or the reason they're buying is because their brother pointed out that this product was on sale, or I had a promotion that was at the end of the month. Those kinds of things that aren't necessarily the real reason why someone might have bought it that allow us to kind of come back to that. Communicate the importance of responsiveness. This is something that is probably not talked about very much, but with customers, they get distracted. They might not realize that the fact that they're not responding to you is actually having an impact on how you kind of go about this process. It may give you a lot of anxiety that they're not communicating yet things are okay. So be upfront about, hey, listen, we have our process is modeled to kind of help you get started. You may get busy. You may not be able to get back quickly enough. But if we kind of ping you a few times, just let us know. And if we need to escalate, what's the path to take? And certainly take this up with the person that buys it, so that we know that we've already decided that or set expectations that this is going to happen in a two-way conversation, and we need to make sure that we're talking back and forth. Because if you have customers that kind of go quiet on you and it's hard to get them re-engaged, it can start to be very frustrating, and it can really kind of derail your process overall. So that's it. Thank you.